morning, beautiful people. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our Patient Empowerment Educational Series, Part 3. This is our third month. We did Part 1 in May, Part 2 in June, and July is Part 3. So the goal here is to educate patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals in dealing with cancer. And so My Style Matters and Cancer Awareness Network have teamed up to provide these platforms so that our people can be better educated to make good decisions about their own health. And so I just like to welcome each of you to the Zoom presentations this morning. And also like to thank our sponsor, Amgen, who has been able to sponsor us for these series. One other thing I like to mention is that at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat box. Some of yours may be on the side. I'm not sure what medium you have. But if any questions you have while someone is speaking, please feel free to enter those questions and comments in the chat box. And at the end of the presentations, Tia will go ahead and read through those questions so the speakers don't get distracted. And so with that, we're going to have Tia's going to come on and introduce our speakers this morning. And after the speakers, we'll have time for Q&A. And so we're just so grateful that you guys are here with us this morning. Thank you so much. And so Tia, you can introduce our people. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. And good afternoon, wherever you are. We're all in different coasts. I'm going to get started and introduce our speakers. And I would like to say on behalf of My Style Matters to our speakers and to the attendees, thank you so much for participating and welcome once again. Gabrielle King is the president and founder of GDK Associates, LLC, a grassroots advocacy and community relations firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Gabrielle has over 30 years professional experience in creating and implementing advocacy, community engagement, and public health education initiatives for diverse representation of communities and industries. She has demonstrated public policy experience in healthcare and social justice issues and empowers constituents by offering legislative advocacy training. Additionally, Gabrielle developed and executed communications and media relations campaign on behalf of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, Clark Atlanta University Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development, and Vox Media Public Relations, and HEAL Collaborative. As recent as of 2019, Gabrielle has provided advocacy, stakeholder engagement, and event planning consulting services for Abbott Laboratories, Amgen, AstraZeneca, Bristol Myers Squibb, Kite Pharma, Novartis, Novo Nordisk, Vertex Pharmaceutical, and ACS Georgia Lung Cancer Screening Roundtable. Prior to Mrs. Gabrielle's consulting career, she served as a senior director for alliance development at the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers Association, managing East Coast operations on federal and state healthcare policy issues. Gabrielle began her career in Washington, D.C. in communications for AdvaMed, educating, engaging, and mobilizing healthcare providers to serve as experts who were instrumental in the passage of the FDA Modernization Act of 1977 to improve the regulation of food, drugs, devices, and biological products. Gabrielle received her Bachelor's of Business Administration from the University of Akron. She served as a certified family mediator in the Post Commander's Office, Alamalu, am I saying that right? Military Reservation in Honolulu, Hawaii from 1985 to 1987. Gabrielle currently serves as the Executive Board Secretary for New Life Community Ministries and the Executive Board for Georgia Coalition for Safe Communities, both in the Metro Atlanta area. Raquel is a graduate of Tuskegee University and holds a bachelor's in business sales and marketing. She is a young breast cancer survivor and is very dedicated to helping other women in the fight, win the fight against breast cancer. In 2014, Raquel founded Pink Tops, a 501c3 community nonprofit organization located in Alabama that assists women who are breast cancer survivors and their families throughout the Jefferson, Shelby, and Walker counties, with breast cancer awareness and education to at-risk women living in these communities. Pink Top's objective is to introduce innovative programming that provides help and inspiring hope to those affected by breast cancer through education, supportive services, and referrals. Pink Tops is the new age breast cancer organization that is here to serve women and men in need and are hands-on when it comes to helping others win the battle. Raquel lives by the quote, "Impossible is possible. With God, I am a living testimony of what God can do, and if he did it for me, he can do it for you." Ms. Gabrielle, we'll turn it over to you. And I believe you're on mute. See, I'll get you, see if I can unmute you, because it looks like you're on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tia and Loretta, for inviting me to your program. This is very exciting to have this opportunity to share with your audience the importance of legislative advocacy at the state level. I've entitled this program Beyond the Ballot Box, just basically indicating that you know, we vote, which is great. We vote in presidential elections and primaries, but we also need to vote at the state level. So we need to get involved in legislative issues that are impacting our communities, whatever state that you live in. So we're advocating for change together locally. And this is meant to be a basic element type of presentation because there's so much to cover when we're talking about how to advocate for change through public policy. This could go on for about two hours, maybe even half a day. But we're going to focus on some of the basics. I don't plan to focus on SWOT analysis, which is important for organizations, particularly grassroots organizations that are collaboratively working together. And I won't also address how bills become laws, because that is a presentation in itself. You can advance to the next slide. Okay, I opened up with this scripture because when I was thinking about this and thinking about where we are today in this environment, and so much is being driven by change public policy wise, I thought this was a good scripture to start with. "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be you therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." Matthew 10:16. You can advance to the next slide. So when we think about advocacy, you know, people have different definitions of advocacy. This presentation is specifically legislative advocacy, but here are two definitions: the American Standard, and I've got them. The photos are cutting off some of my screen. Advocacy, active support as a cause, the act or process of supporting a cause or a proposal. Is there a way to move it over a little bit, or maybe I can collapse the photos on the side?
Let me see.
It's blocking. I might have to do it on my screen. I think I can. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Oops.
Can you still see?
Yeah. Let me see if I can go to the next one. I think you're going to have to advance it.
Okay. Are you still able to see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Can everyone else see? Okay.
Yes.
Um,
No, we can't
No.
see the screen right. There it is.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go. Yes. Okay. So in collective advocacy, that's what we're talking about today, because again, oops, let me go back one slide.
I think it's mine that they're seeing. I'll reshare it. Okay. Can everyone see it now?
Just need to go back one more. Yes, right there.
Okay.
Oops, there it is. There it is, right there.
Okay.
Okay, collective advocacy. You have two goals, and I'm saying collective advocacy because again, the whole idea of this is to work together in collaborations, particularly at the grassroots level. So your two overall goals would be to build build a relationship with your elected officials at the state level. These are, of course, policymakers that will make you a valued source of information on whatever issue or topic that you're trying to get legislative action on. So that would be for now into the future. So you want them to know that you are the go-to organizations on these particular issues. And then secondly, to impact elected officials' decisions and actions on a particular piece of legislation that is important to your community. And that could be across healthcare issues, education, housing, whatever that might be. You can go to the next one. Your approaches to advocacy campaign will consist of the following that you want to make sure. First of all, you need a clear understanding of the legislative process within your state. They can vary state to state. Some sessions are longer than the others. Particularly in the South, we tend to have shorter sessions. Here in Georgia, it's 40 days. Knowledge of the needs of your individuals and communities. So, beforehand, you want to make sure that you know exactly where the gaps are in the communities and what your focus is going to be on when you're seeking some type of legislative action. Also, that you want a diverse representation of your supporters, organizations. It could be county officials, basically who makes up the village. And it could also be other organizations that might have a national presence that aren't necessarily grassroots, but they do have maybe the bandwidth or the capacity to help support your issue. And they have the expertise to pull down to support you as well. And of course, like any campaign, you want to have a strategic plan that will involve education, of course, your research and data collection, action, and then of course, the courage to move forward with that campaign. And then of course, preparation and willingness to be in this fight for the long haul, because we know it does take time. You might not get something through on the first session of that year, and you might be able to carry it on to the following year with your state legislators. Next slide, please. Okay, here are some basic, again, these are going to be basic fundamental aspects of your legislative advocacy campaign. So of course you want to identify, you want to have personal stories, and from, just from knowledge that I know about your organizations, there are a number of different individual stories that you want to capture and be able to have those on hand to share with your state legislators. So personal stories get attention, it localizes the issue, it captures the passion, sincerity of your issue, and that's what policy makers need to hear, because that does impact change. And it also isolates the issue. This is the difference between what should happen and what actually really happens. Tying your personal story to an issue helps you focus on a policy that might be or could be changed, updated, or abolished. So that's really important, because it's not always necessarily a change that needs to happen. There are laws and there are policies on the books that basically need to just go away, or just need some type of changes to it. And then, of course, your action plan. You want to know what you're asking for. You select your targets. What we mean by that, your targets could be those particular state legislators that are part of certain committees, whether it's a health committee. Those targets, your target audience, that could include the media, could include businesses. You want to develop your messaging, which is part of your communication approach. And of course, a timeline. So everything should line up in your particular state with the timeline of your session. So if you have to plan this out before your session starts, you want to give yourself a pretty good lead time to educate your community, to get your action plan together, and to do all your due diligence in that area. And who else has a stake in your goals and objectives, of course. Next slide, please. Okay, the next 10 I'm going to go through very quickly because I want to remain within your time frame. These are what we call our 10 B's of engaging elected officials. Be realistic. Your goals to influence your legislator's decision on a piece of legislation we've already talked about. Not to make dramatic, unrealistic, and sweeping changes, because you'll get a lot of pushback. I know we're in an environment right now where we've been begging for certain changes for decades. So I personally don't think that it's unrealistic what we're asking in terms of racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare and across other institutions. Build on long-term relationships, making your value source. We talked about that as well, both now and to the future. You remember your elected officials. I think this is a key point to remember. Your elected officials serve you. They are public servants. You do have rights and responsibilities to engage with them. You just have to know and understand the process. You can move to the next slide. And be prepared. Research your legislator's background. A lot of this you can find online at your state, at your legislature, depending on the state that you're in. You can actually get their bios, know the address of their offices, how to reach out to them, their contact information. Be well informed about your issues, of course, like we said, and appropriate information to back up your position. Practice and prepare for addressing your arguments of opponents. A lot of times this part we forget, that we're so excited and empowered about our issue, but we don't really know what our opposition looks like or what messages they're pointing out there, besides some of the ads that you see. So you've got to, there are silent oppositions, and then there are the ones, of course, that are out front. And then lastly, be prepared to discuss your position with key staff members of that legislator's office. Not necessarily will you always have get access to the state legislator in particular, whether it's representative or senator, but talking with their legislative staff, like their an aide or someone like that, who is also well versed on those issues, is also you'll have good success there as well. Next slide. Be accessible. Invite your legislators, your local legislators out to visit your office facilities, but also when you're holding events, they should be there, you know, so, but you'll need to know who your district representatives are, but invite them out to these programs that you're having. I know we're not doing live right now, but if there's an opportunity, if you feel appropriate and you're doing Zoom calls like this, where you're really educating the community on an issue, invite your state legislator to be on. And if there's a chance for them to have a few minutes on your agenda, that's a good thing as well. But you want to prepare for that to make sure that they're available. Participate in public meetings, hearings that are held at your local state capitol. We don't go to these enough. I know sometimes it's transportation issues or scheduling, but you know, really pull your groups together and make those visits when your states are in session. And always be in a position to ask your legislators how you can help them, particularly, again, on areas around healthcare that are impacting your community. Next slide, please. And be honorable. Arrange meetings in their district. Call and identify yourself as a constituent. This is important. You cannot call yourself and identify as a constituent if you don't know who your state legislator is in your district. So that's going to be important to know. Explain the nature of your concern. Again, indicate that you would like to arrange for a brief meeting with them. Talked about that. Again, we talked about staff. And once the meeting is set, send a brief written communication. We'll get into that a few slides later, specifically how you would communicate with them, meetings or writing to them. Next slide, please. Be influential. Avoid technical detail. Now, this is not data, because we do want data and we want to be able to present facts, but you don't want to necessarily give too much technical information when you're meeting with a state legislator. There is an opportunity to have a leave behind, and that information can be in your packet of what you leave for them. But when you're, you know, talking with them, state facts, have your research, but avoid a lot of technical detail. Be respectful of their viewpoints, because they will tell you, because they're talking to other people, of course, and it could be your opponents. So be respectful. Don't threaten legislators with retaliation in polls. That's a no-no. We're in a very heated environment right now, and we just have to, again, maintain and focus on our goals and what we're trying to accomplish. Know when to step back. Avoid arguing. Thank the legislator and excuse yourself. We know that we get more attention when we're calm, we're level-headed, and we focus on the our agenda, our goal, what we're trying to do. Of course, like I said, thank you. Next slide, please. Be different. Let your legislators know that you are from their district. Again, discuss, don't lecture on them. Here, I just want to, I think it's good for us to talk about racial and ethnic disparities right now in healthcare and inequalities, because we're finally recognizing that this needs to be addressed and where the gaps are. So being grassroots organizations, collectively, you carry a lot of weight, and you have the personal stories that are very compelling, and they're very impactful. So that's what I mean in this instance, to be different. Never provide inaccurate or misleading information. We all know that. Keep up regular and constant communications, but don't be a pest. And you can just share information with your legislators. You can find out if they have a Facebook page. So you can follow them there as well. And when it's appropriate to share information, just go through their legislative staff to find out ways that you can continue to keep those lines of communications open. Next slide, please. Be assertive. Say what you want. Can't stress that enough. Get to your point. When you're talking with a legislator, whether it's in writing or it's in person, now like virtually if you have that opportunity, ask for a firm commitment on a specific course of action. So if they recommend that you do something during your communication with them, take them up on that offer. Ask legislators who already support your issue to go out front on it. So you want them to take what your message and gain other support from other legislators and reach across the aisle. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, don't hold just to one side. Cross over to the aisle and talk to other legislators, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing pretty much. And we have to find where those synergies are and where the alignment on what our needs are. And don't assume an official's position on an issue based on previous years, because we know things are changing, right? And people can evolve based on what they're learning, what they're understanding, and who they're hearing from. Next slide, please. Be brief. State your main issues, get to the point, and stick to it. Don't raise a host of issues. So you go in, this is part of your campaign again. You know what you're going in there for, you know what you're going to ask for, and so don't get lost in the weeds on other issues. And make sure that everyone that is part of your communication with those state legislators are on the same message, and you're all in agreement on what you want and what the expectations will be. Provide personal point of view, of course, that's good. Point out how your background experience makes you an authority on this matter. So if you're a patient, if you're a caregiver, if you're a healthcare provider, you have the information that these legislators will need to make a decision about public policy change. So let them know that your experience in that area. Close by emphasizing how legislators' constituency, as well as, I have in here Illinois, in your particular state will be affected by this legislation. Each state is different. So what might be a policy issue in my state around healthcare may be different in your state. There may be some similarities, but you want to make sure whatever that healthcare policy issue is, it's specific to your state. So you want to talk about that particular state. Next slide, please. Of course, be professional. I think I have to go too much into this. If you have a meeting, make sure you're on time, probably be early. Make sure you've got everyone's information, your stakeholders are, you have the information that you want to relay to those state legislators or his staff. Always send a thank you letter back to them after your meeting or your communication has happened. Remember that compromise is part of the process. Be willing to make some sacrifices to achieve your goal. You might not get everything you want. You might have to carry that over to the next legislative session, like I said earlier. And then lastly, be ready, because you just might get what you're asking for. Next slide, please. Okay, a lot of this might sound repetitive, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. Plan your advocacy campaign. Get it organized before the threat becomes apparent. We pretty much know where we are right now. We're going into sessions at the state level. There's been some changes, but we know we're going into the presidential election November. That's pretty much, but we're talking state here. Enlist other stakeholders, you know that, experts to be part of your team. Always be at the right table, stay involved in your issues wherever you can. We're doing everything virtually now. I suggest get online to certain organizations that are following your issues around cancer so that you stay in the know. Share information that you gather. You always want to be on top. You want fresh information and how you can utilize that in your campaign. Develop your messaging, make sure it's credible, know your stuff, factual information, clear, concise, develop your PR campaign too, because you want to involve the media. You can do that locally. There are a lot of good weekly newspapers that are at the community level, so you want to make sure that you get your message out through your local print and broadcast media, of course, online. We know all of that, all the social media platforms. I think you can go to the next slide, Tia. Okay, this, I'm going to just do this quickly. I did have about 10 slides on this, but again, I think next time when we do a larger program, we can focus more about public hearings. And we're not holding hearings now, but in the future, public testimony is good. When you have the opportunity, anyone can testify at hearings. The challenge is making sure that the time frame fits and you understand what the procedures are for signing up. A lot of times there's not a long notice that you'll get when a hearing is being held on a particular piece of legislation in a certain committee. Like I said, we can do this part later, but I just wanted to let you know there are opportunities at the state level for public hearings. Next slide, please. How you find out about hearings. This is something you can do, I mean, in your spare time, is to go on your, whatever state that you're in, go on your General Assembly and just kind of refresh yourself to know where to go to get this information about hearings. Just become familiar with it for your particular state. There are legislative bulletins out there that will give you kind of like a framework on how these happen. The committee clerk's office. Again, we can talk about this at a later time, a bit more depth. Next slide, please. Some hints to testifying. I think we can move on from here, Tia. We can go to past this. You can pass that one, Okay. Oops, back up. I'm sorry. One more. Okay, here we are. 3 main points, and I think I'm coming to the end. This is writing. So there is opportunity right now to send emails to state legislators on particular issues. Again, you want to lead with letting them know that you are a constituent. So you're going to have to know who your legislator is. That you represent a local organization. So you're going to tell a little bit about that organization. And make sure you have some professional, personal expertise on that. You could do this as a group email. It doesn't just have to be one organization. You can all do this and list out the organizations. It could be sent by one organization and list out all those that are your stakeholders in supporting this particular issue. The closer your legislator feels to you, the more powerful your argument is likely to be. Next slide. Provide details and facts about the legislation. So you want to know what that legislation is. If it's something that you're trying to get passed, there's a bill that has been filed and introduced, or it's a particular issue. So you want to give some background on that as well. Explain why this matters to you, why it matters to your community, and also include a personal story. If you want to upload an attachment to that of it could be like a short video of someone. You can provide a link for that legislator to go and look at something else, but everything must tie back to your legislative issue. and if it ties to a particular piece of legislation that has been filed, has been introduced. Next slide, please. And again, of course, you want to ask for action in that email communication. You want yes or no vote on if it's in a particular committee. You can also ask that a hearing be held on the bill. Ask to be informed about their particular position. Always provide your address and way that they can get back with you, your availability, and if there's an opportunity to have a verbal communication or even virtual communication. Next slide. Okay, in conclusion, here's what we want to cover in our campaigns, or some last things I want you to think about. Determine your legislative priorities. Identify your key legislative and agency targets. Agency could be Medicaid. It could be the public health department or health department in your state. Identify and secure your stakeholders. Again, you want a cross-functional type of coalition of organizations to help support what you need. Also to provide maybe technical assistance. You might not have a policy person that's on your organization, so you want to find a stakeholder that does have a policy person that could help follow the legislation and kind of feedback that information. So you want a diverse group of stakeholders. Develop your key messages on whatever your focus is going to be. Determine your communication vehicles. That would be social media. That would be talking with your local media, newspapers, radio, television. Create your timeline to make sure everything aligns with your process, and then activate your campaign. And I think that's it. Next slide. This we opened up with a prayer. We opened up with a scripture, but I wanted to leave this last quote that I found. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, devoted citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that has, and that's was Margaret Mead. The next slide. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Gabrielle. And we'll turn it over to Raquel and have Raquel to start sharing her story and her advocacy work that she's doing in her community. So Raquel, we'll need to unmute you.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm Raquel Smith out of Birmingham, Alabama. Glad to be here. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 27. I was one of my hospital's youngest cases of breast cancer, stage 3 triple negative breast cancer. I have new boobs now, proud of them, cancer-free. But my whole motto with Pink Tops is the new age breast cancer. We have so many people that fall through the cracks, and I hate to say women of color, but women of color are the people that fall through the cracks. We're the ones that are dying. We're the ones that are at a higher rate. We're the ones that lack vitamin D. We are so uneducated about different things that go on. It's come to be a real CEO of your health. So I felt like that's where God wanted to use me, because I didn't really want to tell my story, but I knew it was a story that had to be told because I was so young. And I had women coming up to me left and right. All the way to the point where they wanted to look at my boobs. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So I just had to ask God, what you want me to do? And God made it real evident on what he wanted me to do. And that was to help my people and to be able to help them, to be an advocacy for them, to be able to show them the different things, how they can come up out of chemotherapy, how they can come up out of radiation, how they can have children after breast cancer, even with sexuality after breast cancer. A lot of the ladies that I encounter struggle with those different type of things. So when we did Pink Tops, I wanted to do something that was able for women to kind of get their sexy back, find who they were and get back to who they were to begin their lives all over again. And one of my big things that we kind of talk about at Pink Tops are the 3 Ps. The first P is facing the problem. A lot of us, especially women of color, we don't want to face the problem. A lot of times we were told from our ancestors, oh, that's nothing, don't worry about your boobs, this not going to be anything. Or we're in stage 4 breast cancer, about to lose our life. You know, so that was one of the things that I think that we didn't really put a lot of attention on as in facing our problems. Then it was the next thing. How can we be proactive with these problems? I wanted women to understand, how can they understand breast cancer? How can they live after breast cancer? And how can they fight breast cancer? And then our third one was productivity. And that's what came about with Pink Tops, because I wanted to be a productivity when it came to helping other women. And when it came to productivity, that was learning how to do your eyelashes, or learning how to pick out the proper wig, or learning how to what makes you comfortable with shirts and different things when you're having to wear drains, or you're going through a mastectomy, or you're going through reconstruction. You know, a woman in her 20s and her 30s really don't understand that until they go through that walk. So when I went through that walk, it really came evident to me that this was something that we needed to educate more younger women on. We needed to open up the playing field and have a conversation about this. We need our older women to help the younger women understand the process. Because I can remember when my grandmother had a small incident with breast cancer, nobody knew about it. We didn't talk about it. It was just something that happened and it was quiet. So once I began to see my voice being heard, and I seen how so many women didn't understand it, but they wanted to know, I knew Pink Tops was something that had to happen. We recently, last year is going on our second year with our Resource and Wellness Center. So at our Resource and Wellness Center, we have a big mirror in there where the women come in, and when they come in, most of the time they're getting ready to start their treatment. So we put them in front of the mirror, and my first question is to them, what do you see? A lot of women see broken, but I see God putting something back together. You know, so you never know what the end result is when you're going through these tests, and that's how you get the testimony. So with Pink Tops, we decided to say plastic because I wasn't really involved with the grant processing. Being a young colored girl myself, I really didn't know how to get a lot of funding, so we started recycling. That's how Save the Plastic, Save a Life came along. We start recycling all over Alabama. We had people bring in plastic from Montgomery, Mount Olive, Hoover. We even had people in Atlanta trying to collect plastic, but we just couldn't realize how to get it to Birmingham. You know, but being able to recycle for a cause opened up the playing field for high schools. So a lot of the high school girls wanted to do the recycling program because it was something fun to do, but they also gained knowledge about breast development. They also gain knowledge about BRCA analysis and the testing of genetic testing. And they also gain knowledge on how to live after breast cancer. You know, so I really think coming together as a whole is the only way we're going to bridge this gap, especially for women of color. You know, it's a lot of things out here, but it's a lot of things that we're not educated on. And it's a lot of things that we just say, oh, don't worry about it, when it's a problem. And not only is it a problem, we got to be productive about this problem. And once we productive about this problem, we got to show some proactive. You know, so I feel like with those 3 P's together, we can do a lot more things. We help women with their utility assistance. We help women as far as get their Sexy Back program. That's wigs, eyelashes, you name it, we can do it. But I felt like it was a lot of medical stuff already out, and I didn't want to step on anyone's toes when it came to the medical terminology and the medical resources. So I wanted to design an organization that was more of a sisterhood, and an area where women can come and know someone that went through the same thing that they've gone through, and to give a helping hand. Not only to give a helping hand, but to get some financial assistance. But not only to give financial assistance, but to also be a prayer warrior. So all these things together was able for us to bridge the gap, and now seeing the different women come up out of it and blossom and get their hair back, and they be like, oh my goodness, Raquel, I remember when we first started, I was like, yeah, look at you now, you know? So I think a lot of it deal with just being able to embrace each other, and also being able to just stand in the gaps for each other, because going through breast cancer is tough. But like I said before, and I always tell people, impossible is possible with God. I believe it, I stand by it, I know it, I'm a walking testimony of it. So, you know, I tell women all the time, don't look at the bad situation, just look at how you can get out this situation. And I think it's really big for us now with everything going on with the COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. It's also about health that matters. And if we don't have our health, we don't have either one. You know, so I think that's really important. And I'm just glad to be a vessel to help women go through this journey, So, you know, if anybody have questions for me, I'm an open book. Like I said, I'm very dedicated to it. I love working with the ladies. I love working with the young girls, especially when it comes to genetic testing, because a lot of people don't have no idea about genetic testing, especially women of color. You know, so I think these things are really important. This program that you guys have, I think is really important too as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We do have a question in the chat. And this question is from Ms. Gabrielle, and I'll go ahead and take you off of mute so that you can be able to answer the question. Let's see, you're still on mute. Okay, there you go. So the question that came through the chat is, what is the best way to develop relationships with your legislators? That's a really good question.
I think to invite them out into the community. You know, during the session, depending where you are, once they're in session, this Capitol opens up and they begin their session. They're going to be at the Capitol a lot. There are times when they're back in their district. So here in Atlanta, they all come here, and then there are certain days where they're back where they live. That's the best time to reach out to them. If you're having a program, invite them out. You can do, right now we're doing everything virtual. I think that any opportunity where you want them to hear from constituents, where you want them to hear from your stakeholders, bring them on. Even more if you're able, like I said, to have them on your agenda, just to give them a few minutes to be on your agenda. That way they are part of what you're trying to do. It really is about educating them.
Awesome, thank you. What advice, and I guess this question will go to both of you, what advice do you have for getting started with an advocacy program?
Raquel, you want to go?
Okay, my biggest advice is follow your heart. If your heart is right with it, your mind will follow behind your heart. God will send you the resources. It took Pink Tops maybe about 4.5 years before we really started getting a lot of support and people really started taking us serious. They seen the plastic, but they just couldn't put the whole thing together, because we would go through thousands and thousands of pounds of plastic with Waste Pro and more coal. But once they got to see the whole project and everything together, it kind of made it easier as far as getting out what we were trying to do. But my biggest thing is definitely follow your heart, pray about it, and the resources will come.
Absolutely. And I would add to that is get as many people that support what you're trying to do on board with you, right? I like to say anyone who loves cancer patients should be involved. Churches, businesses, right there in your community. Educate them, bring them on board, your city council people, name it. It's really about you sharing your message, sharing your testimony with them, and asking them, we want you to be a part of this. Cancer impacts everyone, including the patient. So I would say start there, and then start building that campaign and sharing information with all of them to keep them in communication with you. Bring them on board on a Facebook page if you want to start it that way. Like Raquel said, you start there, you lead with your heart, and you build that out.
Awesome.
Can I make a comment before the next question?
Yes.
I just want to add something to what both of the speakers have mentioned. And the other way you can address this is partner with a group that is already advocating, just to see what it's about, to get your feet wet, so to speak, so that you will be able to eliminate a lot of pitfalls, if you will. Like I heard what Rock said, it took her, 5 years to get where she is. And I know with Cancer Awareness Network, it has taken us 20 years to get where we are. But if you have the passion, you have the drive, you share your story, but if you can partner with some people that's already doing what you want to do, join their organization, see how they're doing it before you venture out, that always helps, because it helps you to really understand what the climate is when it comes to advocacy work. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, Raquel, we have a question for you. What is your idea of working with younger breast cancer patients that's not willing to share their story?
My ideal, I'm kind of dealing with a young lady right now. She kind of gave up a little bit on life. She's in her 20s, and I had to kind of deal with it like a delicate support because my oncologist was the one that connected us. But some women are not going to have the same views or the same Christian state, you know, and with that being said, I try to deal with it more on their basis, let them know I'm there to support them, not only to support them, anything they need help, to let them know my arms are here. Sometimes it just takes being a big hug. They really don't have to always hear your story because they're going through it, you know, so I think a lot of times it's just giving a hug and being a listening ear. And I feel like sometimes that really opened up the doors for them to come out and be like, oh, wow, I can do this. Oh, okay, I can come out of this. You know, one thing I've learned through my experience is it's not about you. You can't always make it about you and your story. Everybody got a story. Sometimes it's about how can their story help impact you to help impact them. You know, ways to come in to say, hey, you know, I know you're going through this, but I'm gonna send you some wigs just in case. Just let me know how they turn out. You know, just a soft way of doing it. And I feel like the soft approach is sometimes better than the, hey, I need you to get involved. I need to know how you feel, you know, because it's a difficult situation. And dealing with young women, a lot of young women kind of be in disbelief. A lot of young women don't want to accept it. A lot of young women don't want to lose their boobs. A lot of young women don't want to go through the radiation or the chemotherapy or having to wear wigs, you know, and I had to sometimes just break it down to them one way like this. White women get boob jobs all the time and they look great, but they don't have to worry about cancer. I said, when I talk about Angelina Jolie, that really hits home for a lot of people because they like, dang, she didn't even have to go through anything, but she got her boobs done just so she won't have the risk because she had the genetics. You know, so I think it's just different ways to look at it and approach it, but also always have more of a humble heart with it. And Miss Loretta, thank you, because when I first started Pink Tops, I remember us on the water and I was telling you about it. And you was like, well, Rob, you need to do this. You need to do this. So I definitely take my hat off to you and I appreciate everything in the doors that you have opened around me.
Awesome. So I have a question for you, Raquel. When you started your nonprofit organization, has it gained attention of your legislators and what you're doing? Because not only is it having an impact on the breast cancer patients, but it also has an impact on the environment.
Yes.
So it's a twofold component.
Yes, it was. At first, I think people thought I was kind of crazy because I had all this plastic coming in downtown Birmingham. So people was like, what is this girl doing with all this plastic? That was the question for everybody. Then it kept going on the news with me with all this plastic, you know, so it took a couple of dead walls before some doors opened. But once we really got the voice across and I started getting into the high schools and they started seeing how many young women were trying to get involved with the community colleges, the state of Alabama embraced me. You know, so then they started helping me with different projects, and but it took a minute. And I will say this, and I learned this from my pastor, Mike Moore: consistency is the key to the breakthrough. So if you're consistent about something, the breakthrough will come.
That's great. That's great advice. A great nugget that was dropped today. Thank you. That was really good. I had to take that one in for myself. One thing I want to add also when we talk about advocacy, you know, some advocacy efforts is just making a phone call. You know, when there is something that needs to be pushed through, for example, when there was here in Georgia, when they were trying to make it so that all patients or other patients, even with Medicare, what have you, could actually go to Cancer Center Treatments of America because there was a certain percentage of Georgia residents that could go there. And there was a lot of push for that. And so it was just a matter of us just making phone calls to our legislators to say, hey, you know, we want you to open this up. And through those phone calls and through the advocacy efforts, they actually did, you know, change that for us. So now more patients can actually, who are residents of Georgia, can actually go to Cancer Center Treatments of America. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
just add
Yeah.
one? I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of my slides, I mentioned that, involved agencies locally. Just recently, this is might be a good example. CMS put guidance out to expand Medicare Part B coverage of injectables and infusions at home.
Yeah.
So this is another example. While it's not your state legislator, it is an agency, being CMS, that is looking to change their guidance. And this is an opportunity for organizations to weigh in, or at least submit letters saying that, yes, that needs to be an option for infusions and injectables at home. And they should be covered. So there's, as you're thinking about other policy changes, that could be one example.
Yeah. And one thing that I want to share, when I think about advocacy work, one of the things that I tell survivors too is, just because you have been, you've been diagnosed, you finish your treatment, and whether it's metastatic survivors or what have you, it's still important for us to advocate for all of breast cancer, no matter what stage it is, because we never know where we'll find ourselves in a situation down the road, whether it be a recurrence, whether it be a family member. And it's not just, focusing in on, and I'm speaking of breast cancer because that's mostly the community that I'm in, but also thinking about all of the things that have an impact on a cancer patient or a patient in general. So for example, there's discussion about getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. What impact is that going to have when people are losing their jobs as a result of COVID and can't afford to pay COBRA? So we really have to think about that in, from an advocacy standpoint, and how do we make a difference in our community? So thank you. All right, another question we have, what's the biggest challenge that you face in the work that you do within your community? So that would be for either one of you.
Well, Ms. Jones, you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Oh, you waiting on me? Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, I would have to say one of the biggest challenges for me will be Black in America. And I would say that because being young and Black, trying to do something as far as about breast cancer and really trying to be a financial help and really be a advocacy in the community, it's hard to get a lot of other support. You'll have the people that's in your own small community to support you, but you'll have the other big, huge organizations that's really like, but once again, consistency is the key to the breakthrough. So one thing I've learned with that is, even though you may have some small bumps in the road, continue to try it and continue to do it. Because I hear a lot of women that have small organizations be like, well, I'm not dealing with that big $1 million organization because they got all this money. And I'm like, hey, we need their help though. Even not just for the financial part, but we need their help to reach more people. So it's not always just about the financial part. It's really about who all you can reach. And one thing that I've learned that helps me with Pink Tops, I work with everybody. I don't see color. I don't see sexuality. I don't see none of it. If I'm able to help you, if you fall in our criteria, if you meet the requirements and we can get them help, I'm all for it, But I will say, being a young Black woman trying to do something on such a big caliber, it has its up and downs just because of the statistics and the world we live in, But the consistency has gained Pink Tops the respect. So if I would have fell behind the waist fall or just gave up on trying to reach these people at these multi-million-dollar hospitals and things, they would have never known me. But now they know me from being so consistent. Oh, that's the plastic lady. She don't play about her girls, So it took things as small as saving plastic just to kind of get people attention to what we're really doing. So people say, well, why you still do the plastic and y'all don't get a lot of money for it? But like you said before, it's the twofold. We're cleaning the earth, but we're also putting it towards something to help someone. But I definitely believe consistency, because it's going to always be other organizations around you, but you're better working with them than working alone.
Absolutely.
And I agree. I think it's staying in the fight. My biggest challenge is getting people to be comfortable going to the state capitol and staying consistent until the end of session, staying hammering away. Sometimes we just feel intimidated by the process. I've heard people say, oh, it's just politics. Well, it is, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to be there and be present and be involved.
Awesome.
One of the comments
Oh,
also in one of the questions rather was for, I guess, for Raquel about the specific focus of your program. I know you because I know personally that the plastics was designed to help young breast cancer patients get mammogram or help young women get mammogram because the insurance do not cover you until you get like 40, I think it is now. So kind of share with us your specific focus with your program. I think that part was left out of your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Well, with the plastic, we work with the recycling companies, and it pays pennies. I'm not going to say it pays a lot of money, but it does pay pennies. But it helps us pay for their mammogram assistance. And now we're working with Representative Hollis, which is a state representative here in Alabama, and we're trying to get the laws changed. Whereas with the breast and cervical cancer Medicaid, you have to be either 35 if you have family history or 40 if you don't have any family history. Well, I was 27. So now we're going back looking at some of those laws and trying to get some people to support us to change that, because breast cancer doesn't respect of age. You know, we lost a young lady, which was a Caucasian young lady out of Tuscaloosa. She was 22 when she passed. You know, that's really young. So I just feel like that's one law that I want to see changed under Pink Tops and the things that we've been going through as far as the age on the breast and cervical cancer Medicaid, you know, and the consistency with the plastic and seeing how young the women are in Alabama that are getting breast cancer is caused attention now. You know, so that was the biggest thing with the recycling, and it also brought the high school kids involved. And I really think a lot of young girls are kind of raising themselves nowadays, that they don't have an ideal about breast health. They just know they got boobs, you know? So I think a lot of that is being uneducated, and that's when I partner with Auburn University. And Auburn University comes down and do free genetic testing once a year at our center. That's a $3,000 test that the women can come through Pink Tops and get done absolutely free. You know, so these are the different resources that I want women to know that are available for them, because a lot of women don't have no idea, you know, but just talking about that plastic, it kind of gives a catalyst to open up the conversation about breast health.
Awesome. Any other questions that we have? Any other questions from our attendees? All right, well, Ms. Loretta, do you want to wrap us up?
I want to thank everyone. I noticed that Phyllis has put Pink Top's handle there. You can look at it on your in the chat box. www.pinktops.org. So Gabrielle, if you want to put yours there so people would know how to get in touch with you, we would appreciate that. There was a comment, no, anyway. So thank you guys. We're running out of time. I'm sorry, we got about 2 minutes. Again, I want to thank each person for participating. Please share with your other audience, people that you know in your circle, in your contact, about the next, we have 2 more this month. So if you would go ahead and share that with people so they can join us, and in a way we can assist you, let us know. Because Cancer Awareness Network and My Style Matters is here to support our community, to empower African Americans dealing with cancer, and to encourage those that has a diagnosis. And a lot of times, as I've heard here mentioned today, sometimes you just don't know what to do with all that information. So we can empower each other by having the conversation, by talking about it, by letting people know that there are ways to get beyond it. We do have gifts. And when you register, your name will be put into a giveaway. And so Stronghold Ministries will sponsor the gift for this session. We have another group that's going to sponsor some of the others. And so each time we have a Zoom presentation, we do have a winner. And I don't see the name of our winner for last time, but just keep in mind that you have another way that you can be supportive of us by sharing this information. So thank you guys. If it's nothing else, Tia, we will see you guys at our next session, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you both of our speakers were dynamic.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.